Have you ever been asked a question that made you stop breathing for just a moment? A question so simple, yet so dangerous that it could unravel everything you thought you knew about yourself. That's exactly what happened to me when someone asked, "What was the one thing that tested a woman's boundaries the most?" I stood there, frozen. My mind went completely blank. Time seemed to slow down around me, like those moments in movies when everything gets quiet and you can almost hear your own heartbeat. The weight of years' time, I finally whispered. The years had settled on me gently, hadn't they? But even as I said those words, I knew they weren't true. I had learned something important over the years, something that most people never figure out. It wasn't really about getting older. It wasn't about the number of candles on your birthday cake or the lines that slowly appeared around your eyes. No, it was about how you lived. Ow. How you chose to spend those years. Ow. You let life shape you, or how you fought against it. The perfect marriage myth relationships. That wasn't it either, though many people would think so. I'd been married to him for 10 whole years. Decade of shared mornings, shared dreams, shared problems. We were like two puzzle pieces that fit together perfectly. We moved through life in sync, like dancers who had practiced the same routine 1,000 times. There were no big fights between us, no screaming matches or thrown dishes. No dramatic scenes like you see in the movies. We were what everyone called the perfect couple. Our friends envied us. Our families praised us. But here's the thing about perfect marriages. They're never really perfect. There are always small cracks, tiny spaces where doubt creeps in. Things you can't quite put your finger on. Things you don't want to admit, even to yourself, and for months now, something had been growing inside those cracks. Something I couldn't name, couldn't explain, couldn't make go away. The stepson, who wasn't really a step then there, was Tate, our son. Well, his son from his first marriage, but I had never liked using that word step. It felt cold, distant, like drawing a line between us that shouldn't exist. Like putting up a wall where there should have been a bridge. I hadn't raised him from a baby. I hadn't been there for his first steps or his first words. But I had been in his life for years now. Watching him grow from a teenager into a man, and what a man he had become at 23. Tate was everything a mother would want her son to be. He was successful in ways that impressed even me. He had this natural charm that made people gravitate toward him at parties. He was handsome in that effortless way that made waitresses smile. It's a little brighter and made older women pat his arm when they talked to him. But despite all of this, despite his success and his looks and his charm, there was something about Tate that always puzzled me. He was reserved, like he was holding back some essential part of himself. Quiet in a way that made you wonder what he was thinking about behind those dark eyes. He was introverted in a world that rewarded loud, confident people, and maybe that's what drew me to him. Maybe that's what made me want to understand him better. The invisible wall, but there was always this distance between us. This invisible wall that neither of us seemed able to cross, no matter how hard we tried. It was like we were always standing on opposite sides of a river, able to see each other clearly, but never able to touch. That distance, that one step he always kept between us, was what unsettled me the most. It was like he was waiting for something. But if you asked him what he was waiting for, he wouldn't be able to tell you. He didn't even know himself. And that's what made it dangerous. That's exactly why I had always been so careful. Why I had always made sure we were never alone together for too long. When his father was with us, everything stayed balanced. The lines were clear, the boundaries were obvious, and everything felt safe. His presence was like having a referee. In a boxing match, someone to make sure nobody crossed the line. Someone to keep everything fair and proper. The Chicago business trip had seemed perfect when we first planned it, like something out of a business magazine. The kind of smart, efficient plan that would accomplish multiple goals at once. I had an important meeting there. One that could change the direction of my career. Turning it into a small family getaway seemed brilliant. would be good for Tate too, giving him a closer look at the corporate world, helping him make connections that might open doors for his own future. Everything was arranged perfectly. Hotel reservations made, flights booked, meetings scheduled. I was supposed to come, as always, the three of us together, safe. But then, that morning, as we sat around our kitchen table eating breakfast and going over the final details, something changed. The moment everything shifted, Tate was talking about his project, explaining something technical with his hands moving the way they always did when he got excited about work. Mid-sentence, he just stopped. Like someone had pressed a pause button. The silence stretched out between us, heavy and strange. "I won't make it," his father said quietly, not looking up from his coffee cup. "You two go ahead without me." For a second, I thought I had heard him wrong. "What?" I said, my voice coming out sharper than I intended, but no, he wasn't joking. He took another sip of his coffee, his decision already made, final as a judge's verdict. Tate's eyes immediately dropped to his plate, tracing the pattern there like it held the secrets of the universe. "I don't have to go either, Dad," he said softly, but his father shook his head firmly. "No, it's important that you go with her. You need the experience. Being around her will teach you a lot about business, about life." As I listened to those innocent words, I felt something entirely different stirring inside me. A small knot formed in my stomach, tight and uncomfortable. For just a brief moment, my eyes flickered to Tate. He was already looking at me. In that moment, when our eyes met, something passed between us. It only lasted a few seconds, but in those few seconds, I felt exactly what I had been trying so hard to avoid all these years. We were going to be very alone. The protective gesture, I stood up quickly, my chair scraping against the floor. His father reached out and rested his hand on my shoulder, smiling that easy, trusting smile of his. "Take care of him," he said playfully, like I was the one who might get into trouble. Like I was the one who needed guidance. But as I stood there with his hand on my shoulder, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, I was the one who needed protecting. When perfect plans fall apart, you know how some plans look absolutely perfect on paper? Every detail planned out, every possibility considered, every problem solved before it even appears. This Chicago trip had started as exactly that kind of plan, but now, with his father's last-minute change, everything was shifting. The careful balance we had maintained for years was about to be tested. Tate and I would be alone together for days, and that thought created a restless energy inside me that I couldn't control, couldn't ignore, couldn't make disappear. Later that evening, after his father had gone to bed, Tate and I found ourselves alone in the living room. We were supposed to be going over plans for the Chicago trip, reviewing the schedule, talking about the meetings, discussing what he should pack. But somewhere along the way, our conversations started to shift into something deeper. I found myself giving him advice about the kind of people he would meet in the business world, how he should carry himself, how he should speak, how he should navigate the complex social dynamics of corporate life. Remember, I told him, confidence is everything in business. But not arrogance. There's a fine line between the two. He nodded, but I could tell he was absorbing more than just my words. The more we talked, the more I felt something changing. In the air between us, I wasn't sure if it was just him or if it was me too. But his eyes were on me, not just listening, but watching, studying, like he was trying to memorize something. Every time our gazes met, that familiar weight settled in my stomach. Heavy and warm and dangerous. The question of boundaries. Who was supposed to draw the lines this time? With his father not around, who would be the referee? Who would make sure we stayed on our respective sides of that invisible river? I knew it had to be me. I was the adult, the responsible one, the one with experience. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I knew something terrifying. I wasn't sure I could. What if things got out of control? What if the careful boundaries we had maintained for years suddenly disappeared? What if that one step of distance he always kept finally closed? I tried to push the thought away, but it clung to me like smoke. The morning of departure, the morning of our flight. The sky was gray and overcast, matching my mood perfectly. At the airport, we sat side by side in those uncomfortable plastic chairs. Waiting for our boarding call, Tate was nervous. I could tell by the way he kept fidgeting with his hands, rubbing his palms together, shifting in his seat. He was silent and withdrawn, but this time it felt different from his usual quiet nature. Even though we weren't saying it out loud, both of us could feel it. Something between us had already begun to take shape, like a storm gathering on the horizon. 30,000 feet above ground on the plane, we settled into our seats. He had the window seat, I was next to him. It's close enough that I could smell his cologne. It's close enough that our elbows almost touched on the armrest between us. At first, we stuck to safe topics: business projects, the weather in Chicago, the meetings. I had scheduled normal, boring, safe conversation. But then his voice dropped, becoming softer, more intimate. "Honestly," he said, looking out the window at the clouds below us, "it's probably a good thing my dad didn't come." I turned to look at him, my heart suddenly beating faster. His eyes met mine for just a second before he looked away. "Why?" I asked, though my throat felt dry, like I had been walking in the desert. Tate shrugged, and a slow, knowing smile pulled at the corners of his lips. "Because you're different when he's around, like you're avoiding something." My breath caught in my throat. What did he mean? Was I avoiding something? The scarier part wasn't the question itself. It was the fact that Tate had noticed, that he had been watching me closely enough to see patterns I didn't even realize I had. Chicago at sunset by the time we arrived in Chicago. The sun had already set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The city looked beautiful from the taxi window, all those lights twinkling like stars brought down to earth at the hotel lobby. I approached the front desk to check our reservation. The receptionist, a young woman with a bright smile, handed over 2 key cards. "Your family suite is ready, Miss C," she said cheerfully. I frowned. "Family suite?" The woman nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, a spacious suite with 2 beds. It's very comfortable. As far as I can see in our system, no separate rooms were booked." Wait, what? I had assumed no. I had been certain that my company had booked 2 separate rooms for us. 2 rooms, 2 doors, 2 different spaces where we could maintain that careful distance we had always kept. But now we were sharing the same suite. Tate stepped closer beside me. It's close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "It's fine," he said, his voice calm and composed, like this was exactly what he had expected. But it tied a knot deep in my stomach. Was it really fine? It's a suite. When we entered the suite, everything felt too luxurious, too intimate, too dangerous. The floor-to-ceiling windows spread the Chicago city lights across the room like a blanket of stars. The atmosphere was quiet, yet charged. Like the air before a thunderstorm, there were 2 beds, separated by a small table and lamp. But somehow, even with that distance, something still felt off. The space felt smaller than it should have, more intimate than I was comfortable with. Tate shrugged off his jacket and draped it over a chair with an easy, confident motion. I walked to the window, staring out at the skyline, trying to calm the racing of my heart. The city looked so peaceful from up here, all those people going about their lives, completely unaware of the storm brewing in this hotel room. "Are you tired?" he asked from behind me. Such a simple question, such an innocent question. So why did it make my chest feel tight, like someone was squeezing my lungs? I closed my eyes for a second, trying to center myself. When I turned to look at him, his eyes were soft but intense. Too deep, too knowing, too dangerous. The suggestion. Tate sat on his bed, stretching his arms above his head in a way that made his shirt ride up slightly. "I know this is a work trip," he said, "but we can take some time to enjoy ourselves too, right?" He smiled then, and in that moment I knew everything I had felt before coming here was absolutely right. Some things did lose their boundaries when his father wasn't around. And this time, there was no one to keep those boundaries in place. But then Tate quickly continued, leaning back with a small grin that seemed almost innocent. I meant the hotel bar. I need to unwind a little after that flight. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. The tension in me was unnecessary, something I had created in my own mind. Maybe he was right. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to relax a little, to act like normal people on a normal business trip. I smiled, feeling some of the weight lift from my shoulders. Let's have some fun. The Hotel Barth Hotel bar was surprisingly stylish, with dim lighting that made everything look softer, more romantic. Soft jazz played in the background, the kind of music that made you want to lean closer to hear what someone was saying. It had that luxurious atmosphere that blended perfectly with the Chicago night visible through the large windows. The kind of place where business deals were made and secrets were shared. A few drinks in, I started to feel the weight lift off my shoulders completely. The wine was good, the conversation was flowing, and I realized I hadn't felt this free, this relaxed in a very long time. Tate looked different too, more relaxed, lighter somehow. The alcohol slowly stripped away his usual shyness, his careful reserve. His eyes lingered on me longer than they ever had before. Our conversations felt deeper, more personal, charged with something I couldn't quite name, but definitely felt. I tried to stay cautious, tried to keep my guard up, but something inside me was trembling, awakening, coming alive. The question that had started this whole internal journey came back to me. What was the one thing that tested a woman's boundaries the most? As I sat there in that dimly lit bar, watching Tate's face in the soft light, feeling the wine warming my blood and loosening my carefully maintained control, I finally knew the answer. It wasn't time. It wasn't age. It wasn't even relationships. Sometimes the thing that tested your boundaries the most was discovering that maybe, just maybe, you had been lying to yourself all along. Had I never found him attractive before? Or had I always known and just been too afraid to admit it? And just refused to admit it? It was Latimer drink was empty, and Tate leaned back, his eyes fixed on me, studying me. He bit his lip just slightly. This was the wrong moment. I couldn't stay here any longer. It set my glass down on the bar and slowly stood up. I'm heading upstairs. I have a meeting in the morning. You shouldn't stay up too late either. Tate nodded slightly, a small smile playing on his lips. All right, see you. Good night, Boothus. Eyes looked like they were expecting to say something else. When I got to the room, I still felt unsettled, but it wasn't a bad kind of unease. It was more like a fear of losing control. I dropped a meat bag in the corner. As I turned toward the bathroom to change, I noticed it, the jacuzzi. All these thoughts, the mess. In me head, maybe some hot water would help. Tate hadn't come upstairs yet, which meant I had a little time to myself as E sunk into the warm water. I thought a boutwet had just happened, the conversation's closeness and the way my body had reacted to him. I took a deep breath. Was this normal, or was it just the alcohol? But I couldn't lie to myself. This feeling hadn't just appeared out of nowhere tonight for the first time. I had just let myself feel it after stepping out of the jacuzzi. I slipped on a robe and walked toward my bed, but something stopped me. Tate was sprawled across Heist, slightly drunk, fast asleep. His shirt was unbuttoned, his pants slightly undone. Warmth spread through me. He looked so damn good. Seeing him like this, soundgarden, so exposed, completely rekied him. I held my breath quickly, turning a wedo change. Even that wasn't easy. I could hear his breathing steady, decomforting at one point. I lifted my head and my eyes landed on him again. I realized just how insanely attractive he was. How much longer could I keep denying this? But there was one thing. I knew for sure I was standing on very dangerous ground. Tate, you should change. His voice was a little horsero as I blinked awake. His gaze landed on me, then hesmoled. He shouldn't have, but he did, and when his broad defined chest was on full display in front of me, I knew I was looking too long, but I didn't look away. Tate, still smiling, let his eyes look onto mine. And in that moment, I knew tonight was just the beginning. The next morning, we both dressed in sharp, elegant outfits. The room still carried through it of the tension from last night, but we both acted as if nothing had happened as Chicago's golden morning light spilled through the windows. I watched Tate button up his shirt. He was so composed, so confident, so mature, so handsome, so dangerous. I held my breath and grabbed my bag. Shall we go? I asked. Tate swung his jacket over his holder, his eyes locking onto mine. I was ready, but I wasn't sure what I was ready for yet. The time we left the meeting, I felt a strange sense of relief. Had wanted to observe Tate to see how adapted to this kind of environment. He didn't need to do much, just by the way he carried himself. He made people trust him. How was it for you? I asked. Tate tilted his head slightly and mostly just watched and listened, but it was definitely useful. I smiled. You didn't say a word today. You just stood beside me like my assistant. But one day you go into your own meetings, I few. Don't let your shyness get in the way. There's nothing you can't handle it, armed toward him, and added. I'm telling you this as a 48-year-old woman who's been through hundreds of meetings. You can trust me. He looked at me for a second, then nodded. I do trust you. His voice was so genuine that for a moment I didn't know what to say to break the tension. I gave his shoulder a light tap. Come on, let's grab a coffee. We sat at a small cafe near the hotel. Tate stirred his coffee, looking deep in thought. So had about your personal life, I asked Kid casually. He lifted his gaze. What do you mean? I shrugged. How are things with women? He glanced at me, then smirked it slightly. To be honest, there's not much to tell. I didn't believe him at the bar in the street. Even now women were staring at him. It was like he wasn't even aware of it. But Tate was always the center of attention, and for some reason, that realization bothered me, which was ridiculous. It was wrong, and yet it couldn't hide the sharp way. I set my coffee cup down on the table. Let's go back to the hotel. Tate looked a little surprised, but didn't question it. We got up and started walking back. My frustration hadn't faded as we climbed a hotel stairs. I didn't even dare to examine why I felt this way, and maybe that's why. I didn't notice my footing right before stepping into the elevator. My heel slipped, a sharp pain showed through my ankle as I lost my balance instantly, but before I could fall, Tachins caught me, his arm wrapped around my waist, steadying me. I was breathless on too. Close, are you okay? His voice was last with concern. I looked up at him. His eyes were right there when he looked at me. Something inside me ignited. Is swallowed. I think I twisted it. We need Detto. Get to the room. Tate didn't hesitate. Slid his arm around my back to support me as the elevator doors closed. A space suddenly felt too tight. My ankle pulsed with pain, but the only thing I could focus on was Tate's arm around my waist. I was leaning into him, gripping onto his shoulder for balance, but this touch didn't feel like an obligation. It felt natural when the elevator reached our floor. I tried Toek, but I barely took 2 steps before another wave of pain hit me. I started to stumble. Tate immediately noticed with a hesitation. He lifted me into his arms. Are you seriously carrying me? I said. Why did? He smirked. You're not really giving me a choice here. His voice held that familiar teasing tone, the one that made my stomach flip. He adjusted his grip, securing me against his chest, and as I rested against him, I felt the warmth of his body, the strength in his hold, his breath near my skin. I knew we weren't supposed to be this close, but he couldn't stop it. When we reached their room, he carefully laid me down on Thebed. He adjusted my legs, but the hem off me skirt had ridden up slightly, folding gordly. I should have fixed it, but I didn't because my eyes were on Tate. His eyes were on me a moment too long. Then Tate exhaled softly, shook his head, and pulled back. I'll get some ice. Headed toward the mini fridge while I stayed there thinking about things. Shouldn't be thinking about feeling things I shouldn't be feeling. When he came back holding the ice pack, his face was serious. He knelt in front of me carefully, taking my stylus. I'll staking my ankle in his hands. He pressed the cold pack against my skin. I sucked in a sharp breath. I should have told you before I lifted my gaze. Told me. What he looked at me deep intense. You can't run from this has wallowed we can't something hot spread through? My veins, this was dangerous butat the same time it felt to right tape butt before I could finish my syntagis. Hand lifted to my face, his thumb brushed softly along the corner of my lips, and in that moment there was no going back, he pulled me in. I pulled Jim in, and finally he kissed me. It was soft but the energy behind it was undeniable, low yet electric, like a force pulling, under-consuming me completely. And for the first time I didn't even think about stopping it. I should have, but I didn't. It was clear that we didn't want to waste any time. It was like we had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Hadn't even touched the clothes. I'd almost forgotten the pain in my leg. Tay came up to me, and he was really close. I could see what his hands were trying to do. We were moving forward. We didn't want to wait too long when I said, "Touch, you're very handsome, and I have to admit, I'm very attracted to you." I was so excited that my body couldn't stand. Still, Tate told me I was beautiful at that moment. I felt something big inside me. I may have made a loud noise I didn't remember. I can guess why I looked at Tate, and his shirt was unbuttoned eds. Very impressive, what a big body I have. He was very big all over, and it excited me a lot. I had to help him some items because of that. I hope the hotel is well insulated. Tate said, Elod, and replied, "You're going to need a lot of hotels with good insulation from now on." I was shocked. Me body contracted and my legs weary, exerting a lot of force, I think. Tight like that because he had the summary action. This was just the beginning wit. About after this, Tate, breathless on, grinning, looked at me and asked, "Did you really just say that?" My vision was still blurry and my breathing wasn't steady. "I did," I whispered in Thatmond as I saw the hunger in his eyes. It knew there was no turning back. As Helen backed slightly, his breath warm against my skin, I felt every inch of my body react. Tate, still holding my gaze, murked, "I guess this Chicago business trip is going to last a little longer." It froze for a second, then I started lying. "Looks like it," I said, trying to steady my breath. Tate tilted his head slightly. That same knowing smirk still in his lips. I have no complaints about thought. We didn't look away from each other. We just kept smiling. This was only the beginning, and nothing would ever be theism again. This story isn't overstating for more if you've made it this far. I know this story has gotten to youthers. So much more to come, and you won't want to miss any of it. Hit that follow button, turn on notifications, and don't forget to leave a comment below.